The stagecoach lurched over another rut, and Clara Whitfield pressed her palm against the worn leather seat to steady herself. Through the dust-clouded window, she watched the endless prairie roll past, golden grass bending before the wind like waves on a vast, earthen sea. She had been traveling for 3 days now, each mile taking her farther from everything she'd ever known in Missouri. Her fingers found the letter tucked inside her traveling case, its edges soft from handling. She didn't need to read it again. She'd memorized every word during the long journey. Samuel Morrison seeks hard-working woman for matrimony. Ranch established. Children welcome. Protestant preferred. The words were practical, businesslike. Nothing like the romantic notions young girls whispered about back home. But Clara wasn't a young girl anymore. At 24, with her parents gone and no prospects in sight, she needed stability more than sweet words. The other passengers had long since grown quiet. A drummer and a dusty bowler dozed in the corner, his sample case clutched to his chest. Across from her, an elderly woman in widow's weeds stared out at the horizon with eyes that seemed to see nothing at all. They'd picked her up at the last station, and she hadn't spoken a word since. Clara smoothed her best dress, a serviceable brown wool that had seen better days, but was still respectable enough for meeting one's future husband. She'd saved for months to afford the fabric, sewing it by candlelight after long days helping Mrs. Henderson with her laundry business. The dress needed to last. She couldn't afford another for some time. "How much farther to Cedar Ridge?" she asked the driver when they stopped to water the horses at a lonely way station. The grizzled man spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Another day. Maybe day and a half if the weather holds." He squinted at the western sky where clouds gathered like bruises. "Though I wouldn't count on it. Storm's been building all week." Clara nodded, trying not to let her anxiety show. She had exactly $3 left after paying her passage, enough for a few meals if needed, but not enough for a return ticket. This marriage had to work. There was no going back. As the coach resumed its bone-rattling journey, she thought about the life she'd left behind, the cramped boarding house room that smelled of cabbage and despair, the endless hours bent over washboards until her hands cracked and bled, the pitying looks from married women at church, the whispers that followed her. Poor Clara, orphaned so young. Such a shame she has no family to arrange a proper match. The correspondence marriage might not be the stuff of fairy tales, but it offered something more valuable than romance, a chance to build something lasting. Samuel Morrison's letters had been brief but not unkind. He wrote of good land, steady water, a small but growing herd of cattle. He needed a wife who could work hard, manage a household, perhaps give him sons to help with the ranch. Clara could do that. She'd been working hard all her life. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the driver urged the horses faster. Clara gripped her case tighter as the coach picked up speed, swaying dangerously on the rough trail. The widow woman finally stirred, her thin fingers clutching a worn Bible. "First time west, dear?" Her voice was like paper rustling. "Yes, ma'am." Clara managed a smile. "I'm to be married." Something flickered in the old woman's eyes. Pity, perhaps, or understanding. The frontier takes as much as it gives. Remember that. Before Clara could ask what she meant, the sky opened. Rain hammered the coach roof like bullets, turning the trail to mud within minutes. The horses struggled, hooves slipping, and Clara heard the driver cursing over the storm's fury. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the prairie in stark, terrifying flashes. "Hold on!" the driver shouted. The coach tilted sickeningly. Clara's stomach lurched as they skidded sideways, the wheels fighting for purchase in the mud. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought they would overturn. Then, miraculously, the wheels found solid ground again, but the relief was short-lived. "Axle's cracked," the driver's voice carried over the storm. "We'll have to stop at the next shelter." Through the rain-lashed window, Clara glimpsed a cluster of buildings in the distance. Not a town, just a few structures huddled against the storm. The coach limped toward them, axle groaning with each rotation. They pulled up beside a barn, and the driver helped his passengers dash through the downpour to what appeared to be a small trading post. Inside, Clara shivered in her soaked dress while the driver negotiated with the proprietor, a thin man with suspicious eyes. "Can't fix an axle until the storm passes and the ground dries some." The proprietor said, "That's 2 days. Minimum. 3 if the rain keeps up." Clara's heart sank. 2 or 3 more days meant her arrival would be even more delayed. What would Samuel Morrison think? Would he believe she'd changed her mind? The thought of him giving up on her, perhaps finding another bride, sent panic through her chest. "I could arrange other transportation," she ventured. "Perhaps a wagon?" The proprietor laughed, not unkindly. "Ma'am, nobody's going anywhere in this weather. Not unless they want to end up bog-stuck or worse. You'll wait like everybody else." She spent a fitful night on the trading post floor, her traveling case as a pillow, listening to the storm rage outside. The widow woman prayed quietly in the corner, her whispered words lost in the wind's howling. The drummer snored, seemingly unbothered by their circumstances. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and muddy. Clara stepped outside to find the prairie transformed. Grass greener, air sharp with the scent of sage and wet earth. In the distance, she could see the mountains, their peaks snow-capped even in late summer. "Beautiful country," the driver said, joining her. He was checking the damaged axle, shaking his head. "But she's a harsh mistress. You sure you want to stay out here?" Clara thought of her alternatives, returning to Missouri, to poverty and pity and endless toil with no hope of improvement. "I'm sure." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Well, you got spine. I'll give you that. Your man's lucky." The repairs took 3 days, 3 days of dwindling funds and growing anxiety. Clara helped the proprietor's wife with cooking and cleaning to offset the cost of her meals, falling into the familiar rhythm of women's work. But her thoughts remained fixed on Cedar Ridge, on the man waiting there, on the new life that seemed to slip further away with each delay. Finally, on a clear morning that promised heat, the coach was ready. They'd lost the widow woman. She'd hired a private wagon to take her north to her son's homestead. But they'd gained new passengers, a young couple heading to California, their faces bright with dreams of gold and fortune. As they rolled west again, Clara felt the weight of her decision settling over her like a shawl. Each mile was a commitment, each hour a promise. She was no longer Clara Whitfield, laundress and orphan. She was Clara Whitfield, bride-to-be, soon-to-be Clara Morrison, rancher's wife. The landscape grew rougher, more beautiful. Red rocks rose from the earth like ancient sentinels. Eagles circled overhead, riding thermals Clara couldn't feel. The young couple chattered excitedly about their plans, but Clara remained quiet, watching the world transform outside her window. "Cedar Ridge, 2 hours," the driver called as they stopped for a final change of horses. Clara's hands shook as she tried to tidy her appearance. Her dress was wrinkled beyond help, her hair refusing to stay pinned despite her efforts. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who'd been traveling for nearly a week, weathered by storms and distance. But there was no time for vanity. The coach was moving again, carrying her toward her fate. She pressed her face to the window, searching for the first glimpse of the town that would be her home, the ranch where she would build her new life, the man who would be her husband. The prairie stretched endlessly before her, golden and vast and full of promise. Somewhere out there, Samuel Morrison was waiting. Clara gripped her letter one last time, then tucked it away. There was no turning back now. The frontier had claimed her, for better or worse. All she could do was meet it with the same determination that had carried her this far. The coach rolled on, wheels turning steadily toward tomorrow, toward a life she could barely imagine but desperately hoped to build. Clara Whitfield was going to meet her destiny, 1 dusty mile at a time. The stagecoach wheels ground to a halt, and Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Through the dust-covered window, she saw a solitary figure standing beside a weathered barn, a tall man in work clothes, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. This had to be Samuel Morrison. "Whispering Creek Ranch," the driver called out, already climbing down to retrieve luggage from the boot. Clara frowned, checking her letter once more. Samuel Morrison's ranch was called Sunrise Valley, and it was supposed to be just outside Cedar Ridge. She leaned out the window, squinting at the landscape. No town in sight, just rolling grassland dotted with scrub brush and a modest cluster of buildings that made up the ranch. "Excuse me," she called to the driver. "Are you certain this is the right place? I'm expected at Sunrise Valley Ranch." The driver scratched his whiskered jaw, looking at his manifest. "Says here, Whispering Creek Ranch for Miss Clara Whitfield. This is the only stop I got written down for you." The man by the barn had started walking toward them, his long strides eating up the distance. As he drew closer, Clara could see he was younger than she'd imagined Samuel Morrison to be, perhaps 35, with sun-weathered features and dark hair that needed cutting. His expression was guarded, confused. There must be some mistake. Clara insisted, gathering her skirts to climb down from the coach. "I'm to marry Mr. Samuel Morrison at Sunrise Valley Ranch." The approaching man stopped short, his brow furrowing. "Ma'am, I'm Eli Turner, and this is Whispering Creek. I don't know any Samuel Morrison, and I sure didn't send for a bride." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She stood frozen on the coach step, one hand clutching the door frame for support. But there has to be an explanation. The letter said, "I don't mean to rush you, miss." The driver interrupted, already back on his seat and gathering the reins. "But I've got a schedule to keep. This is where my manifest says to deliver you, and that's what I've done." "You can't just leave me here." Clara's voice rose with panic. "This isn't the right place." The driver looked uncomfortable but resolute. "I'm sorry, miss, but I can't take you any farther without payment for additional passage. Company rules." Clara's remaining $2 might as well have been 2 cents for all the good they'd do her now. She looked desperately between the driver and Eli Turner, who stood watching the exchange with an unreadable expression. "Please," she said, hating how her voice trembled. "There's been a terrible mistake." "That may be," the driver said, not unkindly, "but it ain't one I can fix. Mr. Turner here's a decent man. He'll see you sort it out." With that, he released the brake and urged the horses forward. "Wait!" Clara cried, but the coach was already rolling away, leaving her standing in the dusty yard with her traveling case at her feet, facing a complete stranger who hadn't asked for her presence any more than she'd asked to be delivered to his door. For a long moment, neither spoke. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, embarrassment, fear, and anger warring for dominance. She was alone, virtually penniless, at the wrong ranch with the wrong man, and her actual intended was somewhere else entirely, probably wondering why his bride hadn't arrived. Eli Turner removed his hat, revealing hair as dark as coffee and eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked as uncomfortable as she felt. "Ma'am, I don't rightly know what to say." There's obviously been some confusion. Confusion? Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sir, I've traveled nearly 1,000 miles to marry a man I've never met, only to be deposited like unwanted freight at the wrong destination. Confusion hardly covers it." He had the grace to look sympathetic. "No, I suppose it doesn't." He glanced at the sun, already beginning its descent toward the western mountains. "Look, it'll be dark in a few hours, and the nearest town is a day's ride. You can't go anywhere tonight. Why don't you come inside? We can try to sort this out." Clara wanted to refuse. Every proper instinct screamed against entering a strange man's home unchaperoned. But what choice did she have? She couldn't very well stand in the yard all night. "I suppose I have no alternative," she said stiffly, picking up her case. Eli reached for it. Let me. I can manage. She clutched the case tighter, needing to maintain some small control over her situation. He nodded and led the way to the house, a modest but well-built structure of logs and chinking, with a covered porch that wrapped around two sides. It was smaller than she'd imagined her new home would be, but neat and obviously cared for. Window boxes held the remnants of summer flowers, and a vegetable garden stretched along one side, protected by a fence that looked recently mended. Inside, the main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Everything was clean but sparse, functional furniture, minimal decoration. A man's space, clearly, but not an unkempt one. Coffee? Eli offered, already moving to the stove. You must be tired from the journey. Thank you. Clara set her case carefully by the door, not wanting to presume she'd be staying any longer than necessary. She took in more details: the rifle mounted above the fireplace, the neat stack of firewood, the table set for two. You mentioned you didn't send for a bride, but the table... My daughter, he explained, filling a kettle from a bucket of water. She's out checking on a sick calf with our hired hand. Should be back soon. A daughter? That changed things slightly. At least there would be another female present, even if a child. How old is she? 6. His voice softened noticeably. Been just the two of us since her mother passed 2 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss. The words were automatic but sincere. She understood loss, understood the particular ache of absence. Eli nodded his acknowledgement and busied himself with the coffee preparations. Clara sat at the table, trying to think through her predicament logically. Somewhere, there had been a mix-up, perhaps at the stage office where she'd boarded, or in the correspondence itself. Samuel Morrison was expecting her. She was certain of that. His last letter had confirmed the arrangements. This Samuel Morrison, Eli said, as if reading her thoughts. His ranch is called Sunrise Valley? Yes, outside Cedar Ridge. Do you know it? He shook his head. Cedar Ridge is about 2 days north of here. I know most of the ranchers in these parts, but that name's not familiar. Course, new folks arrive all the time. 2 days north. Even if she could hire someone to take her, she didn't have the money. And showing up days late, looking bedraggled and explaining she'd been delivered to the wrong man. Would Samuel Morrison even believe her? Would he still want her? The coffee was strong and bitter, but Clara drank it gratefully. The warmth helped steady her nerves, though her hands still trembled slightly around the cup. I could send word to town tomorrow, Eli offered. See if anyone knows this Morrison fellow. Get a message to him explaining what happened. I'd be grateful. Though what good it would do, she couldn't say. By the time word reached Samuel and he could send for her, if he even would, a week or more might pass. An unmarried woman staying at a widower's ranch for that long. Her reputation would be in tatters before she even met her intended. The door burst open, saving her from that line of thought. A small whirlwind in the form of a little girl rushed in, dark pigtails flying, dress muddy at the hem. Papa, Buttercup's doing better. Jake says she might... The child stopped short, wide eyes fixing on Clara. Lily, Eli said gently. We have a guest. This is Miss Whitfield. She'll be staying for supper. The girl approached slowly, suddenly shy. She had her father's dark hair, but must have inherited her mother's features. Delicate where Eli's were strong, with enormous brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Hello, Clara said, managing a smile despite her circumstances. You can call me Miss Clara. Lily studied her solemnly. Are you lost? The innocent question nearly undid Clara's composure. In a manner of speaking, yes. Papa finds lost calves sometimes, Lily offered. He always brings them home until we can find where they belong. Eli cleared his throat. Why don't you wash up for supper and change that muddy dress?" As the child scampered off to what must be her bedroom, Eli turned back to Clara. "I'm afraid supper won't be much. Just stew and biscuits. My cooking's plain but filling." "Please, don't trouble yourself on my account. I couldn't impose—" "Ma'am, you eating or not eating won't change the fact that there's stew on the stove and nowhere else for you to go tonight." His tone was matter-of-fact, not unkind. "Might as well have a hot meal while we figure out what to do come morning." She wanted to protest further, but hunger and practicality won out. She hadn't eaten since the cold biscuit she'd had for breakfast at the last way station. As Eli busied himself with supper preparations, moving with the easy efficiency of someone who'd grown accustomed to domestic tasks, Clara found herself oddly touched. Many men would have let household duties slide after losing a wife, but here was evidence of continued care. The swept floors, the mended curtains, the pot of stew that smelled like it had been simmering for hours with attention to seasoning. Lily returned in a clean dress, her face and hands still damp from washing. She climbed onto her chair and continued her study of Clara with the frank curiosity only children could manage. "You're pretty," she announced. "Like the lady in Papa's picture book." "That's kind of you to say." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks again, this time from the unexpected compliment. Eli set bowls on the table, the tips of his ears reddening slightly. "Lily, it's not polite to make personal remarks about guests." "But Papa, you said we should always tell the truth." Clara couldn't help the small laugh that escaped. "Your father's right about truthfulness being important." The stew was indeed plain, but good. Chunks of beef and vegetables in a thick gravy, served with biscuits that were only slightly burned on the bottom. They ate in relative quiet, Lily occasionally piping up with questions about where Clara had come from and why she'd been in the stagecoach. "Are you staying here now?" the girl asked as Eli cleared the dishes. "No, sweetie, just for tonight. Tomorrow we'll sort out where I'm supposed to be." Lily's face fell. "Oh, I hoped you were staying. It's nice having a lady here again." The words hung in the air, heavy with loss and longing. Clara saw Eli's shoulders tense as he stood at the wash basin. "Time for bed, Lily," he said quietly. "But Papa—" "No arguments. Say goodnight to Miss Clara." The child slid from her chair and, to Clara's surprise, came to stand directly in front of her. "Good night, Miss Clara. I hope you find where you belong." "Thank you, Lily, sweet dreams." After the bedroom door closed, Eli returned to the table with the coffee pot. "I apologize. She doesn't mean to make folks uncomfortable. She just misses female company." "No apology necessary. She's a delightful child." Clara accepted the refilled cup gratefully. "You've done well with her, raising her alone." "I do my best. It's not easy, especially out here." He sat across from her, cradling his own cup. "About your situation, I've been thinking, Jake, my hired hand, could ride to town tomorrow, send some telegrams. Might be we can track down this Morrison fellow quicker that way." "I'd be grateful for any help. I don't understand how this happened. Everything was arranged so carefully." "These things happen more than you'd think. I've heard of folks getting on the wrong train, ending up in entirely different states. At least you're still in Wyoming. Small comfort, but Clara supposed she should be grateful for that much." "I have a little money. Not much, but I could pay for the telegrams." Eli waved that off. "Let's worry about finding your intended first. Rest can be sorted later." His kindness, unexpected and unearned, made her throat tight. "Mr. Turner, thank you. You've been more generous than you had any obligation to be. A strange woman showing up at your door with a wild story. Many men would have sent me packing." "Wouldn't be very Christian of me to turn away someone in need," he said simply. "Besides, it's not such a wild story. Like I said, these things happen." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the day's late light slanting through the windows, somewhere outside. A meadowlark sang its evening song. Despite everything, the mistake, the uncertainty, the impropriety of her situation, Clara felt an unexpected moment of peace. There was something solid and reassuring about this man and his quiet home, something that made her current disaster feel manageable rather than catastrophic. "I should show you where you'll sleep," Eli said eventually. "You can have Lily's room. She can bunk with me tonight." "Oh, I couldn't put her out of her bed." "She'll think it's an adventure. Besides, you need proper rest after your journey." He was right. Of course. Exhaustion pulled at her like a physical weight. The last week of travel, culminating in this disaster, had left her drained in both body and spirit. The child's room was small but cheerful, with a quilt covered in embroidered daisies and a collection of carved wooden animals on a shelf. It smelled faintly of lavender and sunshine. Clara set her case at the foot of the narrow bed, wondering if she'd ever see the room Samuel Morrison had prepared for her. "There's water in the pitcher," Eli said from the doorway, "and extra blankets in the chest if you need them. We'll sort everything out come morning." "Mr. Turner, Eli, I don't know how to thank you." He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "No thanks needed, just doing what's right." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something, then added, "I know this isn't how you imagined things going, but Morrison's a lucky man to have a woman willing to travel so far on faith. When we find him, he'd better appreciate that." Before Clara could respond, he was gone, closing the door gently behind him. She sank onto the bed, finally allowing the full weight of her situation to settle over her. Tomorrow, they would try to find Samuel Morrison. Tomorrow, she would have to explain this embarrassing mistake and hope her intended was understanding. Tomorrow, she would leave this quiet ranch and the unexpected kindness of strangers. But tonight, she was safe. That would have to be enough. Clara woke to the sound of quiet footsteps outside her door. For a moment, she couldn't place where she was. The quilt was unfamiliar. The morning light fell at the wrong angle. Then yesterday's disaster came rushing back, and she sat up with a start. A soft knock came at the door. "Miss Clara?" It was barely a whisper, but Clara recognized Lily's voice. "Come in, sweetie." The door opened just wide enough for the little girl to slip through. She was already dressed, though her braids were lopsided and her pinafore was buttoned crooked. In her arms, she carried a gray tabby cat that looked half asleep. "Papa said not to bother you," Lily whispered, approaching the bed slowly. "But I wanted you to meet Clover. She had kittens last month." "She's beautiful," Clara said, reaching out to stroke the cat's soft fur. Clover began purring immediately, a rumbling sound that seemed too big for her body. "Where are her kittens?" "In the barn. Papa says I can't bring them in the house 'cause they make messes." Lily climbed uninvited onto the bed, settling the cat between them. "Do you like cats?" "Very much. We had one when I was little. Before." Clara caught herself. No need to burden a child with tales of loss. "Yes, I like them." Lily studied her with those serious brown eyes. "You look sad. Are you sad 'cause you're lost?" The directness of children never failed to catch Clara off guard. "A little bit, yes, but your papa is going to help me find where I'm supposed to be." "Maybe you're supposed to be here." "What makes you say that?" Lily shrugged, focused on petting Clover. "Sometimes, when we lose a calf, it finds a different mama cow, and that turns out to be better 'cause the new mama needed a baby and the calf needed a mama." She looked up at Clara. "Maybe you're like that." Clara's throat tightened unexpectedly. "That's a very kind thought, but I don't think it works quite the same way with people." "Why not?" Before Clara could formulate an answer suitable for a 6-year-old, Eli's voice called from the main room. "Lily, you better not be bothering Miss Clara." "I'm not bothering her. Papa," Lily called back, then whispered conspiratorially, "He always thinks I'm bothering people." "Well, are you?" The girl grinned, showing a gap where a front tooth had recently departed. "Maybe a little." Clara couldn't help but smile back. There was something irresistible about the child's honesty and spirit. "How about we go see what your papa has planned for breakfast? I'll help you fix those braids first, if you'd like." Lily's face lit up. "Would you?" Papa tries, but he pulls too hard and his fingers are too big. Clara found Lily's hairbrush and set to work, gently untangling the sleep-mussed hair. The little girl sat remarkably still, Clover purring in her lap. It was such a simple, domestic moment, the kind Clara had imagined having with her own children someday. Children with Samuel Morrison. She reminded herself. Her intended husband, who was somewhere out there, probably wondering why his bride hadn't arrived. "There," Clara said, tying off the second braid with a bit of ribbon from Lily's dresser. "Pretty as a picture." Lily twisted to look at her, and something shifted in her expression. "My mama used to fix my hair. She could do fancy styles, not just braids. I'm sure she was wonderful at many things." "I don't remember her much." The admission was quiet, almost ashamed. "Papa says I was too little when she went to heaven, but sometimes I pretend I remember." Clara's heart ached for the child. She knew that particular grief, the fading of precious memories despite desperate efforts to hold on to them. "That's perfectly natural, and I'm sure she'd be proud of what a lovely young lady you're becoming." Lily suddenly threw her arms around Clara's waist, the cat protesting with a meow as it was squeezed between them. The embrace was fierce and brief, over before Clara could properly return it. "Come on," Lily said, grabbing Clara's hand. "Papa makes good flapjacks." The main room was already warm from the stove, and Eli stood at the griddle, spatula in hand. He'd obviously been up for a while. There was fresh coffee brewing and a stack of flapjacks already on a plate. "Morning," he said, glancing at them. His eyes lingered on his daughter's neatly braided hair, and something flickered across his face. "Sleep well?" "Yes, thank you." Clara felt suddenly self-conscious in her wrinkled traveling dress. She'd slept in her chemise and petticoat, but there'd been no opportunity to refresh her appearance properly. "I hope we didn't keep you from your bed too long." "Lily's used to sharing when we have the occasional visitor. Weren't you, little bird?" "I liked it," Lily announced, taking her seat at the table. "It was like camping. Can Miss Clara stay again tonight?" Eli set a plate of flapjacks in front of his daughter. "That depends on what we find out today. Jake should be back from town this afternoon with news." The hired hand had left at first light, Eli explained, carrying Clara's letter from Samuel Morrison and a description of the situation. With luck, someone in town would know of Morrison or Sunrise Valley Ranch, and they could get word to him. "I've been thinking," Eli said, joining them at the table with his own plate. "Even if Jake finds your intended today, it'll take time to arrange proper transport. You're welcome to stay here until then. Wouldn't be right to put you up in town when we've got room." "That's generous, but I couldn't impose—" "You could help with the chickens," Lily interrupted. "And the garden. Papa's terrible at knowing when the tomatoes are ready." "Lily," Eli warned. "Well, you are. You always pick them too early or too late." Clara hid a smile behind her coffee cup. "I do have experience with gardens. Had to help grow our own food back home." "See?" Lily beamed triumphantly at her father. "She could help, and maybe she could teach me to sew better. Papa tries, but—" "My fingers are too big, I know." Eli's voice was dry but affectionate. "Miss Clara has her own plans. Little bird, we can't just claim her like a stray calf." The comparison to Lily's earlier analogy wasn't lost on Clara. She watched the easy interaction between father and daughter, noting the gentle way Eli corrected Lily's table manners, how he automatically cut her flapjacks into smaller pieces while carrying on conversation. There was a practiced rhythm to their morning, a comfortable routine that spoke of many such breakfasts shared. After the meal, Lily dragged Clara outside to see the kittens. Despite Eli's protests that their guest might want to rest, the barn was cool and dim, smelling of hay and horses. In a corner stall, they found the kittens, 5 tiny balls of fur tumbling over each other in play. "This one's Snowball, even though he's not white," Lily explained, picking up a black kitten. "And this is Princess, and that's Warrior, and—" "Let me guess," Clara said, scooping up a orange tabby. "This one's Pumpkin?" "How did you know?" "Lucky guess." Clara sat on a hay bale, letting the kitten explore her lap. The barn was peaceful. Dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight that leaked through the walls. She could hear horses shifting in their stalls, the distant lowing of cattle. Lily plopped down beside her, arranging her skirts carefully the way she'd probably been taught. For a few minutes, they just played with the kittens, but Clara could sense the child building up to something. "Miss Clara," Lily finally said, not looking up from the kitten in her hands, "do you think my mama can see me from heaven?" The question caught Clara unprepared. I believe she watches over you, yes. Papa says she's always with me in my heart, but sometimes I can't feel her there." She looked up, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Sometimes I forget what she looked like, and then I feel bad." Clara set the kitten aside and drew the little girl against her side. "Oh, sweetheart, that's not your fault. Memory is like that sometimes, like trying to hold water in your hands. The harder you squeeze, the more slips away." "Is that why you look sad sometimes? Are you forgetting someone too?" "Too perceptive by half. This child. I lost my parents when I was older than you, and yes, sometimes the memories fade a little. But you know what I've learned?" "What?" "That love doesn't fade, even when memories do. Your mama's love is in everything, in how your papa takes care of you, in this home you share, in the way you know how to be gentle with small creatures. That's her love, teaching you still." Lily was quiet for a long moment, digesting this. Then she whispered, so quietly Clara almost missed it, "I wish she could have stayed. I wish I had a mama like the other girls in town." The words hung between them, heavy with longing. Clara knew she should say something about how Lily had a wonderful father, how she was blessed in other ways. But sometimes a child's grief deserved to be acknowledged, not redirected. "I know, sweetheart. It's all right to wish for that." Lily turned her face into Clara's shoulder, and Clara felt the dampness of tears through her dress. She held the child gently, remembering her own storms of grief, the way loss could ambush you even years later. "Lily?" Eli's voice came from the barn door, concerned. "What's wrong?" The little girl pulled back, wiping her eyes quickly. "Nothing, Papa. The kittens were just being extra sweet." Eli's eyes met Clara's over his daughter's head, a question in them. Clara gave a small shake of her head. "Not now." It said, he seemed to understand, though worry creased his brow. "Well, those kittens need their mama now," he said gently. "And Jake's riding in. Might have news for Miss Clara." They walked back to the house together, Lily between them, holding onto Clara's hand with a grip that suggested she was afraid to let go. The hired hand was indeed approaching, his horse kicking up a small dust cloud. Jake was a weathered man in his 50s, with kind eyes and a slight stoop to his shoulders. He dismounted with obvious relief, accepting the water Eli offered gratefully. "Well?" Eli prompted. Jake's expression was apologetic as he turned to Clara. "I'm sorry, Miss. Nobody in town's heard of a Samuel Morrison or Sunrise Valley Ranch. Sent telegrams to Cedar Ridge and 2 other towns north of here. The telegraph operator said he'd let us know if any replies come in, but Clara could fill in the rest. If Samuel Morrison existed, he wasn't known in these parts, which meant either she'd been deceived, or the mistake was even bigger than she'd thought. "Thank you for trying," she managed, though her legs felt suddenly unsteady. "There's more," Jake continued reluctantly. "Stage office says they don't have any record of a Clara Whitfield being booked for Sunrise Valley. According to their books, you were down for Whispering Creek from the start." The ground seemed to tilt under Clara's feet. That's impossible. I have the letter. I have the correspondence. I know where I was supposed to go. Not saying you're wrong, Miss, just telling you what they told me. Jake looked genuinely distressed. Could be their mistake. Happens sometimes. Clara felt a small hand slip into hers. Lily had moved closer, offering silent support. It was such a simple gesture, but it kept Clara from dissolving entirely. What do I do now? The question wasn't directed at anyone in particular. She had $2, no means of transportation, and nowhere to go even if she did. The life she'd planned, the future she'd traveled so far to claim, it had evaporated like morning mist. You'll stay here, Eli said firmly, until we can sort this out properly. Tomorrow I'll ride to town myself, see if I can track down more information. There's an explanation somewhere. Papa, Lily piped up. If Miss Clara stays, does that mean she can help with supper and maybe tell me a bedtime story? Lily, Miss Clara's got bigger worries than… Actually, Clara interrupted, squeezing the little hand in hers. I'd be happy to help with supper, and I know lots of stories. It was Lily's smile that did it, bright and sudden as sunrise. For just a moment, Clara's disaster faded into the background. She was needed here, even if only temporarily. A little girl who missed her mother needed someone to braid her hair and tell her stories. It wasn't the future Clara had planned, but for now, it was enough. Papa, can she really stay? Eli looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Clara. If Miss Clara's willing, she's welcome as long as she needs. Lily threw her arms around Clara again, and this time Clara was ready, catching the child and holding her close. Over the tousled dark head, she met Eli's eyes. There was something there, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a need that went beyond mere shelter. Thank you, Clara whispered. He nodded once, then turned away. Best get inside. Looks like rain coming. As they headed back to the house, Lily chattering about which story she wanted to hear that night, Clara felt something shift inside her chest. She was still lost, still far from where she'd meant to be. But maybe, just maybe, being lost had brought her exactly where someone needed her to be. The thought of Samuel Morrison and Sunrise Valley Ranch still hurt, a dream deferred if not entirely destroyed. But as Lily tugged her toward the henhouse, eager to show her the best nesting boxes, Clara found the pain bearable. Tomorrow she would worry about finding her intended husband. Today, a little girl needed her hair braided and her tears dried. And somehow that seemed like purpose enough. Miss Clara, Lily said suddenly, stopping in the middle of the yard. I'm glad you got lost. Clara smoothed a hand over the child's carefully braided hair. You know what, sweetheart, so am I. And standing there in the dusty ranch yard, with storm clouds building on the horizon and an uncertain future stretching before her, Clara realized she meant it. Maybe not glad, exactly, but grateful. Sometimes the wrong turn led you right where you needed to be, even if you didn't know it yet. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Eli called for them to hurry inside. Lily grabbed Clara's hand again, pulling her toward the house and shelter. Come on, Miss Clara? The slip hung in the air between them, Lily's face flushing red. But before the child could apologize or run away in embarrassment, Clara squeezed her hand gently. Come on, sweetheart, she said softly. Let's go help your papa with those storm shutters. They ran for the house together, hand in hand, as the first fat raindrops began to fall. The morning after the storm dawned clear and bright, with that peculiar freshness that follows prairie rain. Clara woke early, her internal clock still set to boarding house hours, and found the kitchen empty. Through the window, she could see Eli already at work in the barn, his silhouette moving between the stalls. She set about making breakfast, moving quietly to avoid waking Lily. The kitchen was well stocked but organized in a man's practical way, everything functional, nothing quite where she expected it. By the time she had biscuits in the oven and coffee brewing, She was beginning to understand the room's logic. "You didn't have to do that." Eli stood in the doorway, hat in hand, a slight frown creasing his brow. "I needed to feel useful," Clara replied, checking the biscuits. "I can't simply sit idle while you and Jake do all the work." He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Though you're a guest here, not hired help. A guest who arrived uninvited and has nowhere else to go." She kept her tone light, but the truth of it stung. "The least I can do is earn my keep." Before Eli could respond, Lily appeared, still in her nightgown, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Something smells good," she mumbled, then brightened when she saw Clara at the stove. "You're still here." "Where else would I be, sweetheart?" The child threw her arms around Clara's waist, nearly causing her to drop the pan of eggs she was scrambling. "I dreamed you left in the night, like—" She stopped abruptly, glancing at her father. "Like what, Lily?" Clara asked gently, setting the pan aside. "Nothing, just a silly dream." But the child clung a moment longer before Eli reminded her to get dressed. Over breakfast, Eli outlined the day's work. "There's a calf got separated from the herd during yesterday's storm, probably sheltering in one of the draws. Jake's riding the north pasture, but I'll need to check the creek bottoms." "I could help," Clara offered. "I may not know much about cattle, but I have 2 good eyes." Eli looked skeptical. "It's rough country, and you don't know the land. Easy to get turned around out there." "Then I'll stay close. I'm not some delicate flower. Mr. Turner, I've worked hard all my life." "She could ride Buttermilk," Lily suggested through a mouthful of biscuit. "She's gentle as a lamb." "Can you ride?" Eli asked. "Adequately." It was only a small exaggeration. She'd ridden the plow horses back home when she was younger, though never with a proper saddle. Eli considered this, then shrugged. "Suppose an extra pair of eyes wouldn't hurt, but you stay where I can see you, and if I say we head back, we head back. No arguments." "Agreed." An hour later, Clara found herself atop a placid mare, trying to look more confident than she felt. The western saddle was different from what she remembered, but Buttermilk seemed inclined to follow Eli's black gelding regardless of Clara's input. They rode in companionable silence at first, the horses picking their way through grass still wet with dew. The land rolled out before them in endless waves, broken by outcroppings of red rock and the occasional cluster of cottonwoods marking a water source. Clara had never seen so much sky, pale blue stretching to every horizon, unmarked by buildings or smoke. "Beautiful country," she said, as much to herself as to Eli. He glanced back at her. "Has its moments. Can be harsh, too. Winter comes early and stays late. Summer can bake the grass to nothing. Not everyone's cut out for it." "Were you born here?" "Ohio, originally. Came out after the war." His voice carried the careful neutrality of someone who'd learned not to discuss that particular conflict. "Figured I'd see what all the fuss was about. Met my wife in Cheyenne. Decided to stay." "What was she like?" The question slipped out before Clara could think better of it. Eli was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Margaret was... She was like spring water, clear and cool and necessary. Could make you laugh when you'd forgotten how stubborn as a mule when she set her mind to something. A slight smile touched his lips. Decided she was going to marry me about 5 minutes after we met. Took her near a year to convince me it was my idea. Clara smiled at that. "She sounds wonderful." She was. The smile faded. "Fever took her 2 winters back. Doctor said there was nothing to be done, but she held on for 3 days. Long enough to make me promise about Lily, about the ranch, about a dozen other things." "I'm sorry." He shrugged, the gesture eloquently masculine in its attempt to minimize grief. "We all have our burdens. What about you? Family waiting back home?" "No, my parents died when I was 19. Influenza. I've been on my own since then." "That why you answered a marriage advertisement, looking for family?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. I suppose that and wanting something of my own, a place to belong to, not just work in. Eli nodded as if this made perfect sense. They'd reached the creek now, following its winding course through a shallow valley. The horses picked their way carefully among the rocks, and Clara concentrated on keeping her balance. There, Eli said suddenly, pointing to a cluster of willows. See it? Clara squinted, then spotted movement among the leaves. A calf, maybe 2 months old, stood belly deep in the creek, bawling pitifully. Poor thing, she murmured. Probably been there all night. Current's not strong, but the banks are steep here. He can't figure out how to climb out. Eli dismounted, pulling a rope from his saddle. Stay with the horses. But as he approached the creek, the calf panicked, thrashing deeper into the water. Its bawling intensified, and it lost its footing, the current immediately tugging it downstream. It's drowning! Clara slid from Buttermilk's back before she could think, plunging toward the water. Clara, no! But she was already sliding down the bank, her skirts immediately heavy with mud. The water was shockingly cold, reaching her knees, then her thighs as she waded after the struggling calf. She could hear Eli splashing behind her, cursing. The calf's head went under. Clara lunged forward, managing to grab one small ear, then got her arm under its neck, lifting its nose above water. The animal was heavier than expected, fighting her efforts to help. Then Eli was there, his rope settling over the calf's body with practiced ease. I've got him. Get to the bank before you freeze. Together they wrestled the terrified animal to shallower water. Clara's teeth were chattering by the time they hauled it onto dry ground, where it stood on shaking legs, bellowing for its mother. Of all the fool, Eli started, then stopped, looking at Clara properly. She was soaked through, her dress clinging, hair hanging in wet strings. You could have been hurt. That water's deeper than it looks. The calf would have drowned. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to still the shivering. Maybe not. Either way, wasn't worth risking your neck. But his tone had lost its edge, and she caught what might have been admiration in his glance. Come on, need to get you back before you catch your death. He shrugged out of his coat, wrapping it around her shoulders. It smelled of leather and hay and something uniquely masculine. Clara pulled it close, grateful for the warmth. What about the calf? He'll follow. They always do once they realize we're their best chance. Sure enough, as they led the horses back toward the ranch, the calf trailed behind, still bawling but determined not to be left alone again. You've done that before. Clara observed, rescued strays. Eli glanced at her, and she had the feeling he knew she wasn't just talking about cattle. Part of ranching, sometimes things get lost. If you can help them find their way back, you do. They were nearly to the ranch when Lily came running to meet them, Jake close behind. Papa, Miss Clara, you're all wet. The child's eyes were wide with concern. Miss Clara decided to take a swim, Eli said dryly, with a calf for company. You saved a calf? Lily looked at Clara with something approaching awe. By yourself? Your father helped a little, Clara admitted, dismounting carefully. Her legs felt like jelly. Get inside and into dry clothes. Eli ordered, Lily, help her. Jake and I'll see to this little fellow. In the house, Lily chattered excitedly as she helped Clara out of her sodden dress. Papa never lets me help with rescue work, says it's too dangerous, but you just went right in the water. It wasn't very smart of me, Clara admitted, toweling her hair. Your father was right to be upset. He wasn't really upset, Lily said with the wisdom of a child who knew her parent well. His face does that when he's worried, but trying not to show it. Like when I had the fever last winter. Clara filed this information away, wondering at the child's perception. She changed into her other dress. Thank goodness she'd packed two, and Lily helped her pin up her still damp hair. There, the child announced, pretty as a picture, just like this morning. Maybe prettier, 'cause your cheeks are all pink." When they returned to the kitchen, Eli was at the stove, heating something in a pot. "Soup," he said without looking up. "Best thing after a cold soaking." "I can do that." "Sit." It wasn't a request. "You've done enough for one morning." Clara sat, accepting the bowl he placed before her. It was simple beef broth with vegetables, but it tasted wonderful. Warmth spreading from her stomach outward. "Jake's reuniting our swimmer with his mama," Eli reported, joining them at the table. "Should be fine now." "Do calves remember being saved?" Lily asked. "Will he know Miss Clara helped him?" "Animals remember kindness," Eli said, his eyes on Clara. "Most creatures do." There was something in his gaze that made Clara look away, focusing on her soup. The morning's adventure had shifted something between them. Some invisible barrier lowered by shared effort and mutual concern. "Miss Clara," Lily said suddenly, "if you married Papa, you could save calves all the time, and I could call you Mama for real, not just by accident." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara felt heat flood her face, while Eli seemed to have turned to stone. "Lily," he said finally, his voice very quiet. "That's not appropriate. Miss Clara has her own plans, her own intended husband." "But he's not here," Lily pointed out with ruthless child logic. "And she is, and she already knows how to make breakfast and braid hair and save calves, and I heard Jake say maybe that other man doesn't even exist." "That's enough." Eli's tone brooked no argument. "Apologize to Miss Clara." The child's lower lip trembled. "I'm sorry, Miss Clara. I didn't mean to be inappropriate." Clara reached for Lily's hand. "No apology needed, sweetheart. You were just being honest. But your papa's right. I'm only visiting. My situation will be sorted out soon." But even as she said it, Clara wondered if it was true. Another day with no word from Samuel Morrison. No trace of the life she'd traveled so far to claim. How long before she had to accept that she'd been deceived? And what then? "I need to check the stock," Eli said abruptly, standing. "Jake could use help with the fence repairs." He was gone before Clara could respond, leaving her alone with Lily, who looked on the verge of tears. "I made Papa mad," the child whispered. "No, sweetheart. You just surprised him. Adults sometimes need time to think about surprises. Do you need time to think too?" Clara considered the question seriously. "Maybe a little, but not about you. I already know you're wonderful." That earned her a watery smile. "Really?" "Really. Now, how about we work on that sampler you mentioned? I'd love to see your stitching." As Lily ran to fetch her sewing basket, Clara remained at the table, staring at the empty doorway Eli had escaped through. The child's innocent suggestion hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle, visible even after the source was gone. Marriage to Eli Turner. The thought should have been absurd. She was promised to another man, even if that man seemed more ghost than reality with each passing day. But sitting in this warm kitchen, wearing a borrowed apron, still feeling the phantom weight of a frightened calf in her arms, it didn't feel absurd at all. It felt like possibility. And that, Clara realized with a start, might be the most dangerous thing of all. 2 weeks had passed since Clara's arrival at Whispering Creek Ranch, and she'd fallen into a rhythm as natural as breathing. Morning coffee with Eli before he headed out to work. Breakfast with Lily chattering about her plans for the day. Then the comfortable routine of household tasks that needed doing. It was nothing like the life she'd imagined with Samuel Morrison. Yet somehow it felt more real than that phantom future ever had. "Miss Clara, look!" Lily called from the garden, holding up a basket of green beans. "I picked all the ready ones, just like you showed me." Clara smiled, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. "Well done, sweetheart. We'll have them with supper tonight." The garden had become their special project. What had been a struggling patch when Clara arrived was now showing signs of thriving under their combined care. She'd taught Lily to check for hornworms on the tomatoes, to water at the roots rather than the leaves, to tell when the squash blossoms would set fruit. "Papa will be surprised," Lily said, skipping over with her basket. "He said nothing good would come from his planting this year." "Your papa underestimates himself." Clara took the basket, inspecting the beans. "He does a fair job with most things." "He does a better job now that you're here," Lily observed. "He whistles sometimes when he's working. He didn't used to do that." Clara felt warmth creep up her neck. She'd noticed it too, small changes in Eli's demeanor over the past fortnight. The way his shoulders seemed less tense at dinner. How he lingered over coffee in the mornings, sharing stories of the ranch's early days. Last night, she'd caught him smiling at something Lily had said, and the transformation of his usually serious face had made her heart skip. "Let's get these beans washed," she said, redirecting the conversation. "Then you can help me with the mending." They worked in companionable silence in the kitchen, Lily standing on a stool to reach the wash basin. Through the window, Clara could see Eli and Jake working on a new corral for the horses. Eli had his sleeves rolled up, his forearms brown from the sun, and Clara found herself watching the easy strength in his movements as he hefted lumber into place. "You're doing it again," Lily said. "Doing what?" "Watching Papa with that soft look on your face. Like Mrs. Henderson looks at Mr. Henderson when he brings her flowers from town." Clara turned from the window hastily. "I was just checking their progress on the corral." "Mm-hmm." Lily's knowing tone was far too mature for her 6 years. "Papa watches you too, when you're not looking, especially when you're singing while you work." "I don't sing," Clara protested. "You do, quiet-like, but you do. Amazing grace this morning while you were making bread." Papa stopped in the doorway for a whole minute just listening. Before Clara could respond to this intelligence, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 2 riders were coming up the lane, not the easy pace of neighbors visiting, but the purposeful speed of people with business to conduct. Eli must have seen them too, for he set down his hammer and walked to meet them. Jake a step behind. Clara couldn't hear the conversation from the kitchen, but she saw Eli's posture stiffen, saw him glance toward the house. "Stay here," she told Lily, moving to the door. The riders were strangers, trail-dusty and hard-faced. One of them, a man with a sheriff's star pinned to his vest, was handing Eli a paper. Said she'd be about 24, brown hair, traveling alone from Missouri. The sheriff was saying as Clara approached. Her intended filed a report when she never arrived. Been checking all the settlements hereabouts. Clara's stomach dropped. Samuel Morrison. After 2 weeks of silence, he'd sent lawmen looking for her. "That would be me," she said, stepping forward. "I'm Clara Whitfield." Both strangers turned to study her, and she resisted the urge to smooth her simple work dress. She knew how she must look, flushed from kitchen work, wisps of hair escaping her practical bun, an apron tied around her waist, not the picture of a properly waiting bride. "Miss Whitfield," the sheriff touched his hat brim. "Your intended Mr. Morrison has been right worried about you, says you were supposed to arrive 2 weeks past." "There was a mistake," Clara said carefully. "The stage delivered me here instead of to Sunrise Valley Ranch. We sent word to town, trying to locate Mr. Morrison, but received no response." The sheriff exchanged glances with his companion. "Well, that explains some of it. Sunrise Valley is near Cedar Pass, not Cedar Ridge, about 3 days' ride northwest of here. Easy enough mistake if someone mixed up the destinations." 3 days. Samuel Morrison had been 3 days away this entire time, waiting for her. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "We can escort you there," the sheriff continued. "Mr. Morrison was quite insistent that you be found and brought safely to him. He's already paid for your passage." How thoughtful of him." Clara's voice sounded strange to her own ears. We'll need to leave within the hour if we want to make good time. The other man said, You'll want to pack your things, miss. Clara nodded numbly. This was what she'd wanted, wasn't it? To find Samuel Morrison, to fulfill the promise of her letters, to begin the life she'd traveled so far to claim. So why did her chest feel like it was being squeezed by an invisible fist? I'll need a few minutes, she managed. Of course. We'll water our horses. The sheriff tipped his hat again, and both men moved toward the well. Clara turned to find Eli watching her with an unreadable expression. Seems your waiting is over, he said quietly. Yes, I suppose I should pack. I'll have Jake saddle Buttermilk for you. You'll need a mount for the journey. That's generous, but... It's practical. You can send her back with someone heading this way. His tone was perfectly reasonable, as if they were discussing the weather. I'll get a bill of sale written up. He walked away before she could respond, leaving Clara standing in the dusty yard with her world tilting around her. From the house, she heard a sound that made her heart crack. Lily crying. Clara found the child in her bedroom, face buried in her pillow, small shoulders shaking with sobs. Oh, sweetheart. Clara sat on the bed, gathering Lily into her arms. You're leaving, Lily gasped between sobs. Just like... Shh, Clara soothed, rocking her gently. It's not like that. I'm not sick. I'm not going to heaven. I'm just going where I was supposed to go from the beginning. But you belong here. Lily pulled back, her face wet and blotchy. You make Papa smile, and you know how to fix my hair, and you save that calf, and you make the best biscuits, and... Lily, honey, listen to me. Clara cupped the child's face gently. I was always meant to be temporary here. You knew that. I hoped, Lily hiccuped. I prayed every night that God would make you stay, that he'd make you want us instead of that other man. Clara's eyes burned. Oh, sweetheart, you and your papa are wonderful. Any woman would be blessed to be part of your family. But I made a promise to Mr. Morrison. It wouldn't be right to break it. Even if staying would make everyone happier? The simple question hung between them, unanswerable in its honesty. Would staying make everyone happier? These past 2 weeks had been filled with a contentment Clara hadn't expected. The quiet evenings on the porch, Eli teaching her to identify the different bird calls while Lily played with her kittens, the shared laughter when they'd all gotten caught in a sudden rainstorm while picking berries, the way Eli's hand had lingered on hers when he'd helped her down from the wagon yesterday, the way her pulse had quickened at that simple touch. Sometimes we have to do what's right, even when it's hard, Clara said finally. Lily studied her with those 2 wise eyes. Is it right, though? Or just what you think you're supposed to do? Before Clara could answer, Eli appeared in the doorway. The men are getting impatient, he said quietly. If you're going, you need to go. Clara rose, keeping one hand on Lily's shoulder. Could you help her pack, please? I need a moment. Eli nodded, his face carefully neutral. Come on, little bird. Let's get Miss Clara's things together. Clara fled to the kitchen, gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles went white. Through the window, she could see the 2 men checking their saddles, ready to spirit her away to the life she'd originally chosen. In the other room, she could hear Eli's low voice, Lily's continued sniffles. 2 weeks, that's all it had been. 14 days of a life that wasn't supposed to be hers. So why did leaving feel like tearing off a piece of her soul? Her meager belongings took only minutes to pack. The traveling dress she'd arrived in, carefully washed and mended, her few underthings, the hairbrush and small mirror that constituted her toiletries. Everything fit easily back into the same carpet bag she'd arrived with. I added something, Lily said quietly from the doorway. She held out a small cloth bundle. So you don't forget us. Inside was one of Lily's hair ribbons and a smooth river stone painted with a childish rendering of a horse. That's Buttermilk, Lily explained. I made it last week. I was going to give it to you for your birthday, but... Clara's throat closed entirely. She pulled the child into a fierce hug, memorizing the feeling of those thin arms around her neck, the scent of sunshine and barn cats that always clung to Lily's hair. I could never forget you, she whispered. Either of you. Eli cleared his throat from the doorway. They're ready. The walk to the yard felt like a march to the gallows. The sheriff and his companion had brought a spare horse for her, rendering buttermilk unnecessary. Clara tried not to read anything into that. Of course they'd come prepared. Samuel Morrison was apparently a man who thought of details. Miss Whitfield, the sheriff said, if you're ready. Clara looked back at the house that had sheltered her, at the garden she'd helped tend, at the barn where she'd learned to save calves and gather eggs without getting pecked, then at Eli and Lily, standing side by side on the porch. Lily was crying silently, tears streaming down her cheeks. Eli stood with one hand on his daughter's shoulder, his face carved from stone. Thank you, Clara said, the words woefully inadequate. For everything, No need, Eli cut her off. You were a help while you were here. We're grateful. The formal words were like a door closing. Clara nodded, unable to trust her voice further. She let the sheriff help her mount the spare horse, settled her carpetbag, and tried not to think about how final this felt. Miss Clara! Lily broke free from her father's grip, running down the steps. Wait! The child flung herself at Clara's horse. Reaching up, Clara bent down, and Lily pressed something into her hand, a folded piece of paper. I wrote it myself, she whispered, for when you get lonesome. Then she was running back to the porch, to her father's arms. Eli lifted her easily, holding her as she hid her face against his shoulder. Ma'am, the sheriff prompted gently. We need to make miles before dark. Clara nodded, tucking the paper into her pocket. She couldn't look back as they rode away. If she did, she might do something foolish like leap off the horse and run back to that porch, to that child who called her mama in unguarded moments, to that man who was teaching her that stillness could hold as much meaning as words. The riders set a steady pace, and soon, Whispering Creek Ranch was lost behind a rise. Clara forced herself to look forward, toward the mountains and the life that waited for her there. Samuel Morrison, her intended husband, the man she'd promised herself to, who'd paid for her passage, who'd worried enough to send men searching for her. It's a good match, the sheriff said conversationally. Morrison's got a fine spread, runs about 300 head. He's well respected in Cedar Pass. That's good to know, Clara replied mechanically. Been looking for a wife for near 2 years. He has real particular about it. You must have made quite an impression in your letters. Clara thought of those letters, careful, proper missives that revealed so little of her true self. She'd written what she thought a prospective husband would want to hear, that she was hard-working, God-fearing, experienced in household management. All true, but so incomplete. Had she mentioned how she sang while she worked, how she couldn't resist barn cats, how the sight of a little girl's tears could undo her completely? The sun was beginning its descent when she finally pulled out Lily's note. The child's handwriting was careful but still wobbly. Dear Miss Clara, I love you. Papa loves you too, but he is scared to say it. We will miss you forever. Your Lily. Clara pressed the paper to her chest, blinking hard against the burning in her eyes. Ahead, the trail stretched endlessly toward a future she'd chosen months ago, when she was a different woman in a different life. Behind her, if she turned to look, she might still see the dust of the ranch where she'd spent 2 weeks learning what home could feel like. She didn't turn around, but she kept the note pressed against her heart, where it seemed to burn with all the words she hadn't said, all the possibilities she was riding away from, all the love she'd found in the wrong place at the wrong time. 3 days to Cedar Pass, 3 days to transform herself back into the Clara Whitfield who'd answered a newspaper advertisement. 3 days to forget the Clara who'd learned to save calves and braid hair and fall in love with a ready-made family. She urged her horse faster, as if she could outrun the voice in her head that sounded suspiciously like Lily's, asking the question that had no good answer. Is it right, though? Or just what you think you're supposed to do? The journey to Cedar Pass took 3 days, as promised. 3 days of dust and saddle soreness, of camping under stars that seemed cold and distant compared to the ones she'd watched from Eli's porch. The sheriff and his companion were polite, but not conversational, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts and the weight of the decision that grew heavier with each mile. Samuel Morrison's ranch appeared on the afternoon of the 3rd day, a sprawling operation that made Whispering Creek look modest by comparison. The main house was 2 stories of fresh-painted clapboard, with real glass windows and a wraparound porch that spoke of prosperity. Cattle dotted the vast pastures, and Clara counted at least 4 hired hands going about their work. "There he is," the sheriff said, pointing to a figure emerging from the house. Samuel Morrison was exactly as Clara had imagined from his letters. Tall, well-dressed even for ranch work, with prematurely silver hair that gave him a distinguished air. He was handsome in a careful way, like a portrait that had been painted to flatter. As their party approached, he strode forward with obvious relief. "Miss Whitfield," he said, helping her dismount with practiced courtesy. "I cannot express how worried I've been. When you didn't arrive as scheduled, I feared the worst." "I'm sorry for the concern. Mr. Morrison, there was a mix-up with the stage line." Clara found herself studying his face, searching for something she couldn't name. His eyes were blue, kind enough, but they stirred nothing in her chest. "No matter. You're here now and safe. That's what counts." He turned to the sheriff. "Thank you for your diligence." "Sheriff Banks, I trust everything is in order?" "Yes, sir. Found her at the Turner place. Just like the stage office finally admitted. Seems they mixed up Cedar Ridge and Cedar Pass." Morrison's expression tightened slightly. "The Turner place? For 3 weeks?" "2 weeks," Clara corrected quietly. "Mr. Turner and his daughter were very kind to accommodate me while we tried to sort out the confusion." "I see." Morrison's tone suggested he didn't see at all. "Well, you must be exhausted. Mrs. Harrington, my housekeeper, will show you to your room. We can discuss everything after you've had a chance to rest." The housekeeper was a stern-faced woman in her 50s who led Clara to a beautifully appointed bedroom on the 2nd floor. Everything was perfect. The iron bedstead with its chenille spread, the washstand with matching pitcher and bowl, the wardrobe waiting for clothes she didn't yet own. It was exactly the sort of room she'd dreamed of during those long nights in the boarding house. So why did it feel like a prettily decorated cage? "Mr. Morrison takes dinner at 6 sharp. Mrs. Harrington informed her he likes folks to dress proper for the evening meal. There are some dresses in the wardrobe. He had them made up based on the measurements you sent." After the woman left, Clara investigated the wardrobe. 3 dresses hung there, all in somber colors suitable for a respectable wife, all perfectly sized. The thoughtfulness should have touched her. Instead, it made her uncomfortable. Samuel Morrison had been preparing for a wife like he'd prepare for a new piece of equipment, efficiently, thoroughly, with attention to specifications. She chose the least formal dress, a dove gray wool, and made herself presentable. In the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The woman looking back appeared proper, respectable, suitable. Nothing like the woman who'd waded into creek water to save a calf, who'd sung while making bread, who'd felt her heart race when a quiet rancher smiled. Dinner was an stilted affair. The dining room could have seated 12 easily, but only 3 places were set. Morrison at the head, Clara to his right, and a thin young man introduced as Morrison's foreman, Tom Brennan. "I trust the Turner household was appropriate during your stay?" Morrison asked over the soup course, his tone carefully neutral, Very appropriate, Mr. Turner is a widower with a young daughter. He was nothing but gentlemanly. Still, it must have been uncomfortable. A woman alone in a house with a single man. Clara set down her spoon carefully. His 6-year-old daughter was present at all times, and as I had nowhere else to go, I was grateful for their Christian charity. Morrison nodded, but she could see he wasn't entirely satisfied. Of course, though in future, we must be more careful about appearances. A rancher's wife must be above reproach. Speaking of the future, Clara said, seizing the opening, perhaps we should discuss our arrangement. Your letters mentioned you were seeking a helpmate, someone to manage the household and provide companionship. Indeed. Morrison seemed to relax slightly, moving to familiar ground. As you can see, the ranch is thriving. I need a wife who can oversee the domestic arrangements, entertain when necessary, and in time, provide heirs to continue the Morrison legacy. Your letter suggested you were amenable to these requirements. Clara noticed he spoke of requirements, not hopes or dreams. And our wedding? When did you envision that taking place? I've arranged for the circuit preacher to come through next week. That should give you time to settle in, learn the household routines from Mrs. Harrington. He paused, studying her. Unless you feel that's too soon, I realize ladies often have particular notions about weddings. In 1 week, she would become Mrs. Samuel Morrison, mistress of this fine house, wife to this successful man. Everything she'd thought she wanted when she'd answered that advertisement all those months ago. Next week is fine, she heard herself say. But that night, alone in her beautiful room, Clara pulled out Lily's crumpled note and read it by lamplight. Papa loves you too, but he is scared to say it. She thought of Eli's face as she'd ridden away, carved from stone to hide whatever lay beneath, of Lily's tears, of her own heart, which seemed to have stayed behind at Whispering Creek even as her body moved forward to its planned destination. The next days passed in a blur of household tours and wedding preparations. Mrs. Harrington was efficiently helpful, showing Clara everything from the contents of the linen closet to the account books she'd be expected to maintain. Morrison was attentive in a scheduled way, joining her for meals, taking her on a tour of the ranch, discussing his plans for expansion. I'm thinking of buying the Hendricks place when old man Hendricks retires, he said as they stood overlooking his vast pastures. That would give us water rights to Willow Creek and add another 1,000 acres. Us, Clara noted. Already he was including her in his plans. She should have been pleased. You're very quiet, Morrison observed. Having second thoughts? No, Clara lied. Just taking it all in. It's so different from what I'm used to. He patted her hand where it rested on the fence rail. The gesture was meant to be comforting, but it felt patronizing. You'll adjust. My mother came from humble beginnings too, but she learned to be a proper rancher's wife. You will too. That night, a rider arrived during dinner. Clara heard the commotion from the dining room, raised voices. Mrs. Harrington protesting about the hour. Then Tom Brennan entered, looking uncomfortable. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Morrison, but there's a man here insisting on speaking to Miss Whitfield. Says it's urgent. Clara's heart leaped. Had Eli come? But when she followed Morrison to the front door, it was Jake standing there, hat in hand, trail dusty and obviously exhausted. Jake? Clara pushed past Morrison. What's wrong? Is it Lily? Eli? It's the little one. Miss, Jake said. His weathered face creased with worry. She's taken powerful sick, won't eat, barely drinks. Doc says it's grief sickness. Happens sometimes with children who've lost too much. She keeps calling for you. Clara's knees nearly buckled. How long? Started the day after you left. Eli didn't want to worry you, said you had your own life to live. But she's getting worse, and I figured you'd want to know. Absolutely not, Morrison said before Clara could speak. Miss Whitfield cannot go gadding about the countryside to every household that requests her presence. She has obligations here. Clara turned to face him, something fierce kindling in her chest. A child is ill. A child who calls me, who needs me. A child who is not your responsibility. Morrison countered. I sympathize with the situation, but you cannot simply leave. We have a wedding in 3 days. The preacher has been arranged. The neighbors invited. Samuel, Clara said quietly, using his Christian name for the first time. If you prevent me from going to a sick child who is calling for me, what kind of marriage are we beginning? His face flushed. The kind where a wife obeys her husband's judgment. I cannot have you running off to the Turner Ranch every time that child takes ill. It's inappropriate. Then, perhaps, Clara said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs, we should reconsider whether this marriage is appropriate at all. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Morrison's face went from flushed to pale. You're overwrought, he said finally. The journey, the preparations, it's been too much. Go to your room and rest. We'll discuss this rationally in the morning. Jake, Clara said, ignoring Morrison entirely. How did you get here? Borrowed Eli's best horse, nearly rode him into the ground. Can he make it back tonight? Jake shook his head. Horse needs rest, but if we left at first light, we'll leave at first light. Clara turned back to Morrison. I'm going, Samuel, a child needs me. If you cannot understand that, then you don't understand me at all. She moved past him into the house, heading for her room to pack. Behind her, she heard Morrison's voice, tight with controlled anger. If you leave, don't expect to return. I won't be made a fool of. Clara, I won't have a wife who puts strangers before her own household. Clara paused on the stairs, looking back at the man she'd promised to marry. He stood in his fine entry hall, surrounded by evidence of his success. And she felt nothing, no regret, no sorrow, just a cool clarity. Then I suppose you won't have a wife at all, she said simply, and continued up the stairs. She packed quickly, taking only what she'd brought with her. The fine dresses stayed in the wardrobe. They belonged to a woman she'd tried to be but couldn't, as she folded her simple traveling dress. Mrs. Harrington appeared in the doorway. You're making a mistake, girl. The older woman said, Mr. Morrison is a good man. He'll give you a fine life. He would. Clara agreed. But it wouldn't be my life. It would be the life he's planned for a wife. Any wife who fits the requirements. Mrs. Harrington's expression softened slightly. And this other man, the one with the sick child, what life would he give you? Clara thought of Eli's work-roughened hands, his rare smiles, the way he'd wrapped his coat around her after the creek rescue, of Lily's arms around her neck, her delighted laughter when they'd found eggs in a new hiding spot. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe none at all, but I know that a little girl is calling for me, and I have to go. She found Jake in the kitchen, where the cook had taken pity on him with coffee and cold biscuits. Morrison was nowhere to be seen, probably in his study, planning how to explain his bride's defection to the neighbors. Ready when you are, miss, Jake said, standing. I'm ready. They slipped out the back door like thieves. Though Clara supposed she was stealing something, the future Morrison had so carefully arranged. The moon was high and bright, showing the path clearly. Jake, Clara said as they walked to the barn. Tell me truly, how bad is Lily? The old hand's silence was answer enough. Clara's heart clenched. We'll ride through the night, she said. The horse can rest when we get there. That's what I figured you'd say. Jake replied, already saddling the weary animal. Eli's going to have my hide for bringing you into this, but I figured you had a right to choose. Choose. Such a simple word for such a momentous thing. As they led the horse out of Morrison's fine barn, Clara looked back once at the big house with its windows glowing warmly in the darkness. Safety, security, respectability, all waiting inside. Then she thought of another house, smaller and simpler, where a little girl lay calling for her, where a man might be sitting up through the night, trying to be strong enough for two. "Let's go home," she said to Jake, then caught herself. Let's go." But Jake just nodded, understanding in his weathered face. "Yes, miss, let's get you home." They rode out into the night, leaving Samuel Morrison and his carefully planned future behind. Ahead lay uncertainty, illness, a child who might not recover and a man who might not want her return. But as the miles disappeared beneath the horse's hooves, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced since arriving at Morrison's ranch. She felt like herself again. And that, whatever came next, had to be enough. The night stretched endlessly as Clara and Jake pushed through the darkness. They'd stopped only twice to rest the horse, and Clara's bones ached from the hard riding, but she couldn't bring herself to care. All she could think about was Lily, sweet, bright Lily, who'd claimed her as Mama and written notes with her careful, childish hand. Dawn was breaking in shades of pink and gold when Whispering Creek Ranch finally came into view. The familiar sight of the modest buildings made Clara's throat tight with emotion. She was off the horse before Jake had fully stopped, running for the house. The front door opened before she reached it. Eli stood there, looking like he'd aged years in the few days she'd been gone. His clothes were rumpled, his face unshaven, and his eyes held a weariness that went soul deep. "Clara," her name came out rough, disbelieving. "Jake, what have you done?" "What needed doing?" Jake said firmly, taking the exhausted horse toward the barn. "Girl had a right to know." But Eli's attention had already returned to Clara. "You shouldn't have come. Morrison." "Morrison can go to blazes," Clara said, pushing past him into the house. "Where is she?" "Her room. The doctor left an hour ago. Said there's nothing more he can do except keep her comfortable and hope." His voice broke. Clara didn't wait to hear more. She moved quickly to Lily's room, her heart hammering. The child lay still in her bed, so small under the quilt. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, and she didn't stir when Clara entered. "Oh, sweetheart," Clara breathed, sinking onto the edge of the bed. She took one of Lily's small hands in hers, shocked at how cold it felt. I'm here now." Eli had followed her, standing in the doorway like he didn't know whether to pull her away or fall to his knees in gratitude. "She stopped eating the day you left, stopped talking yesterday. Doc says it's like she's just giving up." Clara smoothed Lily's hair back from her fevered brow. The child's eyes fluttered but didn't open. "Lily," Clara said firmly. "Lily and Turner, you open your eyes right now. I rode all night to get here, and the least you can do is look at me." "Nothing." Clara felt panic claw at her chest, but she pushed it down. Falling apart wouldn't help anyone. "Do you remember the story I promised to tell you?" She kept her voice steady, conversational. "About the princess who got lost in the forest. Well, I figured out the ending. Would you like to hear it?" Still no response. But Clara thought, maybe, that Lily's breathing deepened slightly. "The princess was very scared in the forest," Clara continued, settling more comfortably on the bed, keeping Lily's hand in hers. "She missed her castle and her family, but then she found a cottage where a woodcutter lived with his daughter. They weren't rich or fancy, but they were kind. They shared their soup and their fire, and the little girl taught the princess how to speak to the birds." She felt Eli move closer, standing now at the foot of the bed. The princess stayed with them while she waited for the king's men to find her. Every day, she helped with the chores and played with the little girl. And something strange happened. She stopped missing her castle, because she'd found something better than gold towers and silk dresses. She'd found a place where she was needed, where her heart felt at home. Lily's fingers twitched in Clara's grasp. Encouraged, Clara continued. "When the king's men finally came, they said the princess had to return to marry the prince she'd been promised to. It was her duty, they said, her obligation. But the princess had learned something in that little cottage. She'd learned that duty without love is just a pretty prison. So she did something very brave. She chose to stay. "Clara," Eli's voice was raw. "Don't—" "She chose to stay," Clara repeated, her eyes on Lily's face. Because the woodcutter's daughter had become like her own child. Because the woodcutter, though he was too stubborn to say it, had shown her what real love looked like, not with fancy words or grand gestures, but with quiet care and steady presence. Lily's eyes opened, just a crack, but enough. "Miss Clara?" The words were barely a whisper. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." "You came back." "Of course I came back. Where else would I be when my girl needs me?" Tears slipped down Lily's pale cheeks. I thought you liked him better. The rich man." Clara's own eyes burned. "Oh, honey, no. How could I like anyone better than you and your papa?" For the first time since Clara had entered, Lily seemed to notice her father. "Papa cried," she whispered. "After you left. He tried to hide it, but I saw—" Clara glanced at Eli, whose face had gone very still. "Well," Clara said carefully, "sometimes grown-ups cry when they miss people. It doesn't mean they're weak. It means they care." Lily's grip on Clara's hand strengthened slightly. "Are you going to leave again?" This was the moment. Clara could feel Eli's tension from across the room, could sense the held breath of decision. She thought of Samuel Morrison, probably eating his breakfast in his fine dining room, planning how to explain his runaway bride. She thought of the security she'd thrown away, the respectable future she'd abandoned. Then she looked at Lily's face, wan but hopeful, and at Eli, trying so hard to remain stoic when his whole world hung in the balance. "No," Clara said simply. "I'm not going to leave again. If your papa will have me, I'd like to stay right here where I belong." "Clara," Eli's voice broke on her name. "You don't know what you're saying. Morrison can give you—" "Morrison can give me things." Clara interrupted. "A big house, fine dresses, a comfortable life. But you and Lily, you give me home. You give me purpose. You give me love, even if you're too scared to say it out loud." "I'm not scared," Lily protested weakly. "I love you, Miss Clara." "I know you do, sweetheart, and I love you too. So much that my heart nearly broke from missing you." Eli moved then, coming around the bed to kneel beside them. His hand covered both Clara's and Lily's, warm and calloused and trembling slightly. "I sent you away," he said roughly. "I let you go because I thought it was right, because I thought I had no claim on you, no right to ask you to choose this life over what Morrison offered." "You didn't send me away," Clara corrected gently. "You let me make my own choice, and I chose wrong the first time, but I'm choosing right now." "Clara," he lifted his eyes to hers, and she saw everything there, the love he'd tried to hide, the fear of loss, the hope he barely dared acknowledge. "I'm not a rich man. This ranch is small. The work is hard. I can't give you servants or fancy parties or—" "Eli Turner," Clara interrupted. "If you list one more thing you think I want instead of what I actually want, I'm going to dump the water pitcher over your head." "Despite everything," Lily giggled weakly. "Do it anyway. Papa's hair is messy." "Traitor," Eli murmured, but his eyes never left Clara's face. "What do you want then?" "You," Clara said simply. "Both of you. Breakfast at the kitchen table and bedtime stories and saving calves and watching the sunset from the porch. I want to wake up knowing I'm where I belong, with people who need me as much as I need them. I want love. Eli. Real love. The kind that builds a life together one ordinary day at a time." Eli's hand tightened on theirs. "And marriage? Because I won't have you staying here without making it proper. Your reputation." "My reputation is already thoroughly compromised," Clara said wryly. "I've been delivered to the wrong ranch, lived with a widower for 2 weeks, and just ran away from my intended husband in the middle of the night. I think it's safe to say propriety has left the building. Then you'll marry me? The question came out rushed, desperate. Not because you have to, not because there's nowhere else to go, but because I love you, Clara finished. Because somewhere between saving that calf and teaching Lily to braid her own hair, I fell completely in love with both of you. Because when I tried to imagine my life with Samuel Morrison, all I could think about was what I'd be missing here. Papa, you're supposed to kiss her now, Lily said, her voice stronger. That's what happens in stories. Eli laughed, a sound rusty with disuse and relief. Is that so, little bird? It's very important, Lily confirmed solemnly. For the happy ending. Clara felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't look away when Eli leaned closer. Well, she murmured, we can't risk the happy ending. His kiss was gentle, mindful of their audience, but it held promises of forever. When they pulled apart, Lily was smiling for the first time in days. Does this mean Miss Clara is going to be my mama for real? She asked. If she'll have us, Eli said, his eyes still on Clara's face. Both of us, just as we are. I already said yes, Clara reminded him, though I might have some conditions. Eli's eyebrows rose. Conditions? First, we're expanding that garden. Your winter vegetables are pitiful. Second, Lily gets to help me make the wedding dress. I'm not wearing anything as fancy as what Morrison bought. Third, she squeezed both their hands. No more being scared to say what we feel. This family is going to speak its love out loud. Bossy, Eli murmured, but he was smiling. I suppose I should have expected that. I'll teach you to expect a lot of things, Clara promised. Lily yawned then, the excitement finally catching up to her weakened state. Will you stay until I fall asleep, both of you? We'll stay right here, Clara assured her. And when you wake up, we'll still be here. That's a promise. As Lily drifted off, her breathing evening out into true sleep rather than the shallow unconsciousness of before, Clara met Eli's eyes over their joined hands. I should probably mention, she said quietly, that I left a very angry man back at Cedar Pass. He might cause trouble. Let him try. Eli said simply, I've got what matters right here in this room. Everything else is just noise. Clara thought of the journey that had brought her here, the mistaken delivery, the weeks of uncertainty, the choice between security and love. It hadn't been the path she'd planned, but looking at Eli's face and feeling Lily's small hand in hers, she knew it had been the right one. Home, she whispered, testing the word. Home, Eli agreed, lifting her free hand to his lips. For as long as you'll have us. Forever, then, Clara said, and meant it. Outside, the sun climbed higher into the Wyoming sky, painting the ranch in shades of gold and promise. Inside, a family that had found its missing piece held tight to each other, no longer afraid of tomorrow. The happy ending Lily had demanded was really just a beginning, Clara thought, but it was theirs, earned through tears and choices and the courage to admit that sometimes the wrong turn leads you exactly where you need to be. And that was more than enough. It was everything. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, painting golden squares across the worn wooden table where Clara kneaded bread dough. 3 weeks had passed since her dramatic return, and life at Whispering Creek Ranch had settled into a new rhythm, one that felt as natural as breathing. Mama Clara, look! Lily burst through the door, pigtails flying, carrying a basket of eggs. 12 today, and I found the secret nest behind the feed barrel. Clara smiled at the title Lily had bestowed upon her, not quite Mama yet, but closer than Miss Clara. They were taking their time, this newly formed family, letting bonds strengthen naturally like seedlings reaching toward the sun. Well done, sweetheart. We'll have a proper feast for breakfast. Clara dusted flour from her hands and examined the eggs. Why don't you wash up and help me start the pancakes? Through the window, she could see Eli working with Jake on the new fence line, He'd thrown himself into improvements around the ranch lately, whistling while he worked, a sound that never failed to make her heart light. "Is the preacher still coming tomorrow?" Lily asked, climbing onto her stool at the wash basin. "He is." Clara felt butterflies dance in her stomach at the thought. Tomorrow, she would become Mrs. Eli Turner in truth, not just in heart. "Are you ready to be my flower girl?" "I've been practicing." Lily demonstrated her careful flower petal scattering walk across the kitchen, nearly knocking over the milk pitcher in her enthusiasm. The wedding would be simple, nothing like what Samuel Morrison had planned. Just family and a few neighbors, a ceremony in the ranch's small parlor, and a meal shared around this very table. Clara wouldn't have it any other way. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was too early for the neighbors who'd been stopping by with congratulations and covered dishes. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and went to answer it. A stranger stood on the porch, a man in a city suit despite the rural setting, holding a leather portfolio. Behind him waited a fine carriage that looked absurdly out of place against the backdrop of corrals and grassland. "Mrs. Whitfield?" His tone was professionally neutral. "Soon to be Mrs. Turner," Clara corrected, wariness prickling at her spine. "May I help you?" "My name is Charles Pennyweather, attorney at law. I represent Mr. Samuel Morrison." He paused, letting that sink in. "May I come in?" Clara's first instinct was to refuse, to shut the door on whatever trouble Samuel had sent her way. But Lily was watching with wide eyes, and she didn't want to frighten the child. "Lily, why don't you go tell your papa we have a visitor?" she suggested calmly. The girl scampered off, and Clara led the lawyer to the parlor. She didn't offer coffee. "I'll be direct, Miss Whitfield." Pennyweather began, settling his portfolio on his knee. "Mr. Morrison is upset about recent events. He feels that promises were broken, expectations unmet. He invested considerable time and resources in arranging your union." "I'm aware of that," Clara said evenly. "I offered to reimburse him for any expenses." "It's not about money." The lawyer withdrew a document from his portfolio. "It's about reputation. Mr. Morrison is a prominent man in Cedar Pass. Your very public rejection has caused him embarrassment." Clara felt her temper stir. "My rejection was hardly public. I left quietly in the night to tend to a sick child." "Nevertheless, people talk. Mr. Morrison has prepared this document. Sign it, and he'll consider the matter closed." Clara took the paper. Scanning its contents, her hands began to tremble, not with fear, but with indignation. "This says I admit to breach of promise, that I acknowledge causing him deliberate harm, and that I agree never to speak of our correspondence or arrangement. Standard language in such situations. And if I refuse to sign?" Pennyweather's expression remained bland. "Mr. Morrison has kept all your letters. Miss Whitfield, letters in which you expressed quite definite intentions toward marriage. He's prepared to share them publicly if necessary to clear his name of any suggestion that he was at fault in this failed arrangement." Before the Clara could respond, Eli entered, taking in the scene with one sharp glance. He moved to stand beside Clara's chair, one hand settling protectively on her shoulder. "Mr. Turner," Pennyweather acknowledged. "Perhaps you could advise Miss Whitfield." "Mrs. Turner, come tomorrow." Eli interrupted quietly. "And I don't need to advise her of anything. Clara's got a good head on her shoulders." Clara felt strength flow from his touch. She looked at the document again, then deliberately tore it in half. "Please tell Mr. Morrison that I wish him well in finding a wife who suits his requirements. I won't sign anything that suggests I was wrong to choose love over convenience." The lawyer's professional mask slipped slightly. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Morrison could make things difficult." "Could he now?" Jake appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. Behind him stood two more ranch hands Clara recognized from neighboring spreads. Funny thing about difficulties, they tend to multiply when a man starts threatening womenfolk. Pennyweather gathered his portfolio hastily. There's no need for unpleasantness. I'm simply conveying my client's position. And we're conveying ours, Eli said calmly. Clara made her choice. Morrison needs to respect it and move on. Any man worth his salt would. The lawyer stood to leave, but paused at the parlor door. The offer stands until tomorrow. After that, he shrugged, letting the threat hang. After he left, Clara found herself shaking. Eli drew her to her feet and into his arms, holding her steady. He can't force me to sign, can he? She asked against his chest. No, darling. And even if he spreads those letters around, what of it? You wrote to a man you intended to marry. Nothing shameful in that. But your reputation, the ranch, will be just fine. He pulled back to look at her face. Clara, do you think anyone in these parts cares what some stuffed shirt in Cedar Pass thinks? They know you. They've seen you tend Lily, help with the calving, bring food to the Hendersons when they were laid up. That matters more than any letters. Jake cleared his throat from the doorway. The boys and I were thinking we might ride along tomorrow when the preacher comes, just to make sure there's no interruptions. Clara's eyes misted. Thank you, Jake. No thanks needed. You're family now. That evening, as Clara tucked Lily into bed, the child was unusually quiet. What's troubling you, sweetheart? Clara asked, smoothing the quilts. That man today, he wanted to take you away? No, honey, he wanted me to sign a paper, that's all. Nobody's taking me anywhere. Lily studied her seriously. Promise? Because Papa was so sad when you left before. I don't want him to be sad like that again. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes, Lily, people try to make us feel bad about choices we've made. That man today works for someone who's unhappy that I chose your papa instead of him. But just because someone else is unhappy doesn't mean we made the wrong choice. Like when Tommy Sanders got mad because I wouldn't trade my best marble for his broken whistle? Exactly like that. Clara smiled. I promise you, nothing and no one is going to take me away from you and your papa. We're going to be a family. And that's final. Lily threw her arms around Clara's neck. I love you, Mama Clara. I love you too, sweetheart. Now, sweet dreams. Tomorrow's a big day. Clara found Eli on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. She settled beside him on the bench, and he wrapped an arm around her. Regrets? He asked quietly. About Morrison? None. About the threats and drama? A few, she sighed. I hate that I've brought trouble to your door. Our door, he corrected. And you haven't brought trouble. Morrison has by not accepting your decision with grace. He was quiet for a moment. I should have courted you properly. Should have spoken up before you left the first time. Things happened as they were meant to, Clara said firmly. If I hadn't gone with those lawmen, if I hadn't seen what life with Morrison would truly be like, I might have always wondered. Now I know, absolutely, that this is where I belong. Still, I wish. Clara silenced him with a kiss. No wishes, no regrets. We found each other, against all odds. That's miracle enough. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Clara woke to find wildflowers on her pillow. Lily's doing. No doubt, she could hear activity downstairs. The sounds of preparation for their simple wedding feast. She dressed carefully in the pale blue dress she and Lily had sewn together, adding her mother's cameo at the throat. In the small mirror, she saw a woman transformed by happiness, eyes bright, cheeks flushed with anticipation. Mama Clara, you look beautiful, Lily burst in, already dressed in her own new frock. Papa's wearing his good suit and Jake polished all the men's boots and misses. Henderson brought 2 cakes. The morning flew by in a whirl of preparation. Neighbors arrived, filling the small house with warmth and laughter. The women fussed over Clara while the men gathered around Eli, offering congratulations and good-natured ribbing. Then, just as the preacher was preparing to begin the ceremony, the sound of an approaching carriage made everyone pause. Clara's heart sank. Had Morrison come himself? But when Eli opened the door, it wasn't Samuel Morrison or his lawyer. It was a small woman in traveling clothes, looking tired but determined. "I'm looking for Clara Whitfield," she announced. "I'm Mrs. Morrison, Samuel's mother." A hush fell over the assembled company. Clara stepped forward, chin high despite her apprehension. "I'm Clara. How may I help you?" The older woman studied her with sharp eyes. "So you're the girl who sent my son into such a state?" She paused, then surprised everyone by smiling. "Good for you." "I beg your pardon." "My dear, I've been after Samuel for years to find a wife who'd challenge him, make him think beyond his ledgers and land deals. Instead, he kept looking for someone who'd fit his notion of the perfect rancher's wife." She shook her head. "When I heard about you, how you left to help a sick child, how you chose love over position, I had to come see for myself." "Mrs. Morrison?" Clara began uncertainly. "Please, call me Ruth, and don't look so worried. I'm not here to cause trouble. Quite the opposite." She reached into her reticule and withdrew an envelope. "Samuel's father left me some property of my own. This is the deed to a small parcel that borders your ranch. Mr. Turner, consider it a wedding gift." Eli stepped forward, frowning. "We can't accept—" "You can and you will," Ruth said firmly. "My son behaved badly, letting his pride override his sense. This is my way of making amends." She looked at Clara. "And of thanking you for showing him that a wife should be more than an acquisition. Perhaps next time he'll look for a partner instead of a possession." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. This is unexpected." "The best things usually are." Ruth glanced around the crowded parlor. "Now, am I too late for the ceremony? I'd very much like to see a wedding based on actual affection." And so, with one more witness than expected, Clara and Eli were married in the parlor of Whispering Creek Ranch. Lily scattered her flower petals with enthusiastic abandon. Jake stood as Eli's best man, blinking suspiciously bright eyes. The neighbors cheered when Eli kissed his bride, and even Ruth Morrison applauded. The celebration that followed was everything Clara had dreamed, not in her letters to Samuel Morrison, but in the quiet moments when she'd allowed herself to imagine a different future. Children ran through the house and yard. Neighbors shared stories and laughter, and Lily fell asleep in Clara's lap as the sun began to set. "Happy?" Eli asked, finding Clara on the porch as the last guests departed. "Beyond words," she admitted, then laughed. "Though I never imagined my wedding day would include being threatened by lawyers and blessed by my former intended's mother, life at Whispering Creek is rarely dull." Eli agreed. "Sure you're ready for it? The hard work, the uncertainty, the occasional drama?" Clara looked through the window at Lily sleeping on the sofa, then up at her husband, and smiled. "I was ready the moment a little girl called me Mama and a stubborn rancher wrapped his coat around my shoulders. Everything else is just details." As if in agreement, the evening star appeared in the darkening sky, bright and steady as a promise. Clara leaned into Eli's embrace, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Somewhere in the barn, a calf lowed for its mother. From the henhouse came the soft clucking of chickens roosting. "Welcome home, Mrs. Turner," Eli murmured against her hair. "I've been home for weeks," Clara replied. "Today just made it official." And it was true. The mistaken delivery that had brought her to the wrong ranch had led her to exactly the right life. Not the one she'd planned, but the one she'd needed, full of love, laughter, and the kind of happiness that came from finding where you truly belonged. The stars came out one by one, bearing witness to the beginning of their shared story. Inside, Lily stirred, calling sleepily for her mama. Clara went to her, heart full, ready for all the tomorrows that stretched ahead. She'd been delivered to the wrong ranch, but love had made it right. And that, Clara thought as she gathered her daughter into her arms while her husband looked on with quiet joy, was the best ending and beginning she could have imagined.